I'm speaking English, but I'm thinking in Italian. Not every student wants to speak a language fluently.
Nice to hear that, but I completely disagree with you. Hi, Luca.
Hi, Steve.
So today I have a special guest, Luca Lamporiello. We're not the gang of four, we're the gang of many, the sort of polyglot community that often gets together at these meetings or communicate, online. And we all have this in common, that we're very interested in learning languages. And we're going to get into a lot of subjects related to language learning, related to Luca's background. But I should say that Luca, who, by the way, has kindly sent me a copy of his book about language learning, who has a variety of personal experiences and practical advice on language learning, which we will get into. But in my opinion, in terms of being able to speak the largest number of languages with the least evident non-native accent, you're right up there. Okay?
You're
absolutely right up there. It's amazing.
Right now.
Amazing. So typically Italians are not considered your archetype polyglot, nor are the Brits or North Americans or, Japanese for that matter. So could you tell us a little bit about your background? Obviously grew up in a monolingual Italian speaking family, environment, neighbors. What were some of the steps that led you to become this very proficient polyglot?
How much time do we have? I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'll try to make it very brief. At the age of 10, I was learning English and French in middle school, and I was not very good at it or at them. But then my parents decided to hire Susan, my American teacher from Chicago. And as I said in the other videos that we recorded for my channel, she inspired me more than anything. It's not just the instructions. It's not about the fact that she was very eager to create material that asked, for example, recording videotapes and movies, but it was her enthusiasm and her belief in me. She started believing in me, and I started believing in myself, which is very important as a language learner, because at that moment, at that time, I hadn't learned any language to any degree of fluency. And when you haven't accomplished something, you haven't acquired a skill yet, you're not sure you can do it. It's like riding a bike or dancing or swimming. You always have this nagging thought that you can't actually do it. And this is probably a nagging thought that a lot of people have when it comes to, can I really get fluent in that language? It looks like a dream. So I think that was something that really was a game changer for me, because I realized I can actually learn this language. And I remember that at the age of 12, I could barely string a sentence together. I had a horrible accent. I still remember, I think I wrote it in the book as well. I used to pronounce enough as inaug, because as you know, notoriously Italians...
Makes sense. It makes sense.
You read as you speak in Italian. And the amazing thing is that after 2 years, I just went to Ireland, because my parents sent me to, back in the day, 3 weeks to learn, to improve, perfect my English. And I still remember that the father, the host family, he came to the airport and we started speaking. He said, why are you here? You're American. What are you doing here? And I was so proud that people were thinking, oh, he thinks I'm American, even if I had an accent or whatever. The fact that I had moved from, barely stringing a sentence together or being able to pronounce enough correctly. I used to pronounce it as inaug, and then people, thought I was American in Ireland. That was quite the accomplishment. And after that, I just realized, wait a second, if I can learn English, I can learn French, I can learn German.
I'm going to interrupt you along the way as you develop your story, because you say things that are very interesting that I want to stress. So first of all, the fact that as a 10-year-old, you were learning 2 languages, that's quite impressive, actually. In North America, at 10, in many cases, we aren't learning any language. And the fact that your parents sent you to Ireland, in other words, you were in an environment where you were basically encouraged to learn languages. The second thing you said that was very interesting was that initially you had a lot of trouble pronouncing the language, and then eventually you became, and very quickly you became quite proficient. And you initially pronounced the language based on how those letters would be pronounced in Italian. And I think there's a major problem people have in pronunciation. They go with the value of the letters in their own language. There is a system in English. There is a pattern. It's a very indirect, convoluted pattern, but there is a pattern to how that language is pronounced. And you were able to acquire that. And so I'm curious. So even before getting to Ireland, your brain had somehow understood that it's not anaug, because there are a lot of Italians who will say anaug for the rest of their life. Yes. I use the example of my father, who would say, like, there's a province in Canada called Nova Scotia, and he would say Nova Scotia. Makes sense, right? Nova Scotia. I think your average Italian would say Nova Scotia. To what do you attribute the fact that your brain was able to get used to the pattern of English pronunciation?
Desire. It was my desire of sounding and being like an American. Especially, we're talking about America because I was surrounded by Americans, meaning that my teacher was American and she recorded all these videotapes that were just American movies. I could imagine myself living in the United States, interacting with locals. And when people, for example, say, oh, you must have this absolute ear, I don't remember exactly what the technical term is, that you must hear all the sounds. Yes and no, meaning that the ear is a channel. But what really makes a difference is actually your brain, not the ear. The ear is just like something that the sound goes through. And I think that when people come to me, because I used to work as a coach, especially an accent coach, and people, for example, wanted to know, how do you speak like almost, of course, nobody exactly speaks like a native, but how do you achieve great pronunciation? I always told them that the psychological part plays a huge role. Now, Stephen Krashen is a famous linguist. Most of your viewers know about Stephen Krashen and his theory about input, but he also talks about the affective filter and about the fact that it's difficult for us to acquire language when you're stressed. For example, in school, we asked them about marks and performance. I think that when I was working with Susan, the environment was so positive. Her figure was so inspiring that I really wanted to sound like her. And I wanted to sound like all those, those people, actors appearing on screen of the videotapes that she had recorded for me. And that made a huge difference because I was paying attention. I always say that one of the most important things when it comes to language learning, acquired grammar, learning vocabulary, and whatnot, is noticing. If you notice things, if you notice that a word contains another small word that is and you understand that, if you notice that grammar pattern has something similar with something else, and if you notice sounds, then you're able to also reproduce these sounds. Everything happens in the brain. So on the one hand, it was my passion. I really liked language learning. The second thing is I really wanted to blend in. I really wanted to sound like an American. And the third, I was paying attention to everything. I started paying attention to everything, and Susan corrected me on the go, and I didn't just dismiss that. I said, "Oh no, let me think about that." And we talked about this in another video that we had, you and I. I don't think that feedback and getting corrected is helpful if you're a beginner and intermediate. But when you get better and better, then you're able to actually see the big picture. And when you get feedback, you're able to incorporate it and improve. I still remember some mistakes that I make, like circuitry. I said circuitry, tree, and I don't remember it. It's circuitry, circuit instead of circuit, or specific things that I was corrected on, but I was already at an advanced level in English. So this is my story in a nutshell when it comes to acquiring great pronunciation. I think that the affective filter and wanting to sound like a native is really, really important.
I would totally agree with you. A few things that you said there that I think are really very important. In a sense, you want it to be an American. Okay, if I'm learning Chinese, if I'm learning French, I want to be a French person. I want to be whatever, Chinese person. When I was in Japan and I was with a bunch of Japanese people in a business meeting, I'm not aware of being non-Japanese. I'm part of them. And when we learn another language, we are learning to imitate another culture. So we have to like it. We have to see ourselves as part of that. And I've often called that sort of cultural weightlessness. In other words, if you say, okay, you would say, I'm an Italian learning English. No. I'm a person of no culture, wanting to be part of another culture. So that doesn't mean that you abandon your Italian culture permanently, but while you are learning the language, you want to be part of that. I think that's extremely important. And I think the other point that you made, which is so important, and that is whether it is a matter of noticing or whether it's a matter of getting corrected for mistakes or looking up grammar, those things are most effective when you already have a large amount of exposure and experience with the language. In the early stages, as you said, the corrections are lost on you. It makes you tenser. But later on, you go, yeah, circuitry. You want to focus in on some of the things that you're struggling with that stand out as being sort of little sore points in what is, a large body of experience that you've had with the language. So I agree with you that there's a time and place for everything.
I'm glad you do agree with me. I wanted to add something else that it's an interesting thing. When I started watching American movies, what I did after the movie was rehearsing all these lines over and over. And I was not just imitating the sounds, but also imitating the way they're like their gestures. This is called pragmatics, right? How they accompany the speech with gestures and everything in between. And I think it's part of that, paying attention subconsciously or unconsciously to the way people express themselves in different cultures. To give you an example, comme ça, oui, je sais pas. No, they speak like they have this way of. I still remember I was talking to the father of my ex-girlfriend. We have spent countless hours with them, embedded like in French culture, and it was just like, hey, do you want to go to the movies? Est-ce qu'on va au cinoche? Est-ce qu'on va...
Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to stress, which is really interesting, is that thought, to me, in my experience, I'm not a neuroscientist, but thought is intertwined with sound. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that if I start speaking like this, I'm speaking English, but I'm thinking in Italian. So this is very important. What I'm going to say is Italian, what an Italian would say, and not an American. And that's the interesting part. If I'm speaking American English, I don't use my hands, and I don't think the way I would do if I were speaking American English with an Italian accent, which is really interesting. And that's also the reason why I don't remember exactly, but I made a video in Spanish, and I said the name of an actor. I was speaking Spanish, and I continued saying, for example, let me say Donald Trump. I would say, estamos hablando de Donald Trump or Donald Trump. I didn't change it because if I had to switch from Spanish into American English, that would have disrupted the flow of my thought. Well, that's an interesting thing that an observation that I wanted to make when it comes to sounds, which is a very complex topic within second language acquisition and first language acquisition.
On the subject of pronunciation, and of course you're very good at, you do an Italian accent quite well.
Thank you. I worked on that.
But obviously everyone's goal is to pronounce as close to native as possible. But most people will not get as close as Luca. And every so often I'll see someone on television, it might be a French minister of foreign affairs or something, or an Italian who speaks English so well. The vocabulary, the accuracy, the precision with which they use the language is so good, of such a high level. Their accent in no way, the obvious French accent, in no way detracts from the impression created by their use of language. So I just wanted to make the point that there's so many different things we can work on in our language learning, our vocabulary, the turn of phrase, word usage, comprehension. And of course, we all want to improve our pronunciation, but there is no harm in having a noticeable accent. Would you agree with that?
I agree 100%. In fact, the fact that I like speaking almost like a native, not obviously not like a native, but it's just something that I really like because I enjoy the process. I really like how the language sounds in my mouth, but it's not strictly necessary as long as people understand me. Of course, if the accent is so bad that it's not intelligible, then we got a problem. We got problems, I would say, in taxes.
Right.
But in general, I believe that intelligibility is the most important thing. As long as you are articulate and you have a decent accent, or at least an accent that is understandable, that's all there is to it. Because again, languages, we tend to forget that language is a means of communication. All those nasty comments that we got on YouTube are a reflection of how society is built around performance. Or you're doing well or you're doing poorly. No, you're communicating. That's the most important thing. But people don't care about that, or it's not that people don't care. Most of the time, sometimes when I see these comments, I think they're missing the forest for the trees. You know, this like anti-fake polyglot thing, or you're a polyglot Europe. Who cares if you speak 20 languages or 30? As long as you enjoy using these languages in your lives, it all that counts. But I just want to stress this because the way we judge others is also, in a way, the way we judge ourselves. So we tend to think we have to perform well, we have to speak well. Yes, if you can speak a language well, that's great. But if you communicate effectively, that's even more important. That's my point. That's my opinion.
And I think, too, it's a matter of what we want to do. So you pointed out that initially you had trouble pronouncing English and eventually you got better. And I know, for example, there was this, I think it was called Anti-Moon or something. There was some kind of a language community
back in the day.
Online.
Yes.
And so I got interested in Russian. So I recorded myself saying something in Russian, reading some Russian. And of course, my pronunciation was terrible. Well, these people just jumped on me. You're using, no good, whatever, and stuff. Don't criticize people who are trying to learn a language if their pronunciation isn't quite what you think it should be, or if they get something wrong. Like, I think anyone who's attempting to learn another language should always just be encouraged. And B, our pronunciation evolves and we get better. And I believe that we get as good as we want to be. So I am sure that the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, he's happy with his French accent, doesn't want to change it, but he uses his English very elegantly, and he has achieved his goal. If he said, I want to speak English like Luca Lampariello, he could work on it and he would get a lot closer. But it's not important. It's a matter of what he or she wants to do. Like I mentioned, my father who spoke English, he could beat us in Scrabble, and yet he had his thing, because in Czech, it's Nova Scotia. Like he would always say shoulder instead of shoulder. Well, would, could. Why is shoulder different? It should be shoulder, not shoulder.
Yes.
So there's a level of stubbornness there. But if I said, Dad, you should work on your, I would never say that to my father, you should work on your English pronunciation. But if people want to, they can start noticing, they can improve. But as you say, as long as we're able to communicate, we're there. That's good enough. And if you want to refine it further, fine, go for it, but it's not necessary.
I agree. And you made a very important point, which is in the form of a question. What is it you want to do with this language? To me, language learning is mostly about oral communication, but not only. Like you, I love reading books about history, geography, the history of the country. But for some other people, maybe they just want to write in that language, or they want to read in that language, then want to speak. Or for them, maybe accent is not as important. So we tend to judge, other people's performance, so to speak, based upon our own standards. Everyone is different. Everyone wants to do something different with a language. And not every student wants to speak a language fluently. Maybe they just want to enjoy, the grammar, the history, or just reading. So it's important to take that into consideration when, we think about what others are doing, which we should not do, by the way, and what we should do when it comes to the language. Why do I want to learn this language? What do I want to do with this language is an even more profound question that is really important. And if the answer is, I don't know, then you should go back to the drawing board and pick another language. That's my humble opinion.
Right. But and also, if you are mostly interested in reading in the language, that's legitimate too, or you want to understand movies. However, I believe that someone who can read novels, who can understand movies, if they want to speak, they will be able to speak very well. And struggle at first, but they'll be able to speak. I often hear, especially, I shouldn't single them out, but say Chinese people, they say, well, I can read well. Like in Vancouver, I had dealings with the Chinese immigrant community, and they say, well, we Chinese. They love to say we Chinese. Like I represent all the Chinese everywhere. But we Chinese, we can read well, but we can't speak. Well, do you read novels? No. So you can read a newspaper article with difficulty, but that's not enough. Can you read novels? Can you understand audiobooks? Can you understand movies? If you have that level of comprehension, you will speak. You cannot be C1 in comprehension and B1 in oral proficiency. You may struggle at first, but you very quickly can get there.
Of course, if you speak. If you don't speak, of course, it's difficult to develop it.
Of course.
But your point is that if you read and listen and you watch a lot, then it comes out very naturally. That's what happened to me. I was watching all these movies in English and one movie a night, every night in French. All of a sudden, I was speaking French like, hey, where does this come from? And all of a sudden, that comes from movies, all that input that I got.
Absolutely. Like in my Persian learning or even Turkish learning, there might be a week or two go by before I speak to my tutor. And in the intervening period, I had been doing a lot of listening and reading. And my tutor would say, wow, you've improved a lot. Have you been talking a lot? No, I've been listening and reading a lot. I mean, to speak well, we have to speak a lot. I think you and I both agree.
Yes,
you have to speak a lot. So either you go to the country or you have a group of your Turkish friends in Rome and you go out every night and eat kebab or something. But you know what I mean?
Not every night, but yeah.
No, but you have to speak a lot. There's no question. But if you don't have a vocabulary, if you don't have that familiarity with the language, you won't be able to speak well. If you have the familiarity with the language and then you get the opportunity to speak a lot, very quickly you'll start speaking well.
Right on the money. And in a chapter, I think it's chapter 6 or 7 of the book, I talk about that. I started speaking with 2 tutors in Hungarian at the beginning. I didn't have that much input, and I just realized this is not going anywhere, because I was rehearsing always the same, sentences, conversation.
Right.
But it might sound technical when we speak about acquiring a language versus learning a language, because fundamentally it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. Acquiring, means to get the language in you by exposure, while learning is trying to scribble down things or like remembering by rote, just remembering words. And it's not the same thing. And the human brain learns much better by acquiring the language through massive exposure. That's the mistake I made. Because the thing is, can't you do both? Yes. But the problem is we have, I don't know about you, about Steve, about me, we have more time because, it's our job. We like languages. It's our hobby. but a lot of people are busy. If you have 30 minutes a day, in my humble opinion, again, it's much better. You're much better off using them to listen and read rather than trying to remember words or speak or write. You can do that. You can do these things on top. I talk about this language pyramid, right? Like at the base.
We will try to show you the language pyramid. I thought that was excellent in your book, by the way.
Thank you. I was just trying to show something because I was struck by this pyramid of the food where the base is fruits and vegetables. And I thought, okay, well, let me think about feeding your mind with language. It's the same concept. You listen and read, you read and listen, you read, etc. That's the base. Then you can do some output and then you can do some grammar. The thing that struck me the most is that the pyramid for most people who go to school is actually the opposite. It's just
inverted,
It's inverted. They do grammar, they try to memorize words. And the scary part of this is that when you tell them about this, they get shocked because the school system has not imposed, but I would say just think about the bias that we have as human beings about all the things that were, taught us that were not true. Mark Twain used to say that what gets you in trouble is not what you know, is that what you don't know. That is something along those lines, that what you think you know, but it's not so. So you take things for granted, they're not granted. And when students come to me or used to come to me as a coach, they went like, oh, I don't have to learn grammar at the beginning. One student told me, I don't have a grammar book. I still have to, I always start with grammar. I said, you don't need that. He was shocked. He said, what do I do? I said, wait a second, I'm going to show you. It's just that it's amazing that if you show a person, this is why I like YouTube, I like education in general, you can share, it's not lecturing people, it's just sharing. Hey, this is not just working for me, but it's working for everybody because the brain is worked this way. The brain acquires language through input. It's as simple as that. It's a simple reality, but it's difficult to digest for most people because they were taught otherwise, which is a little bit sad, but I hope things are changing. It will change.
Now, we both agree on the importance of input, the overwhelming importance of input. So I want to bring up some areas where we have different techniques. And again, I refer to your book where you explained to Richard Simcott, a wonderful polyglot, friend of ours, your approach to language area, and he called you Lucchino. he said, that's wonderful, nice to hear that, but I completely disagree with you. Or words to that effect, if I remember your book.
Yes.
Which isn't true, of course. He doesn't completely disagree because he's also very much dependent on input. However, all successful polyglots develop their own specific techniques that are specific to them. I believe we all learn the same way. Our brains are constructed in the same way, but we have our likes and dislikes. For example, I recognize that if I were to write by hand, I would learn better, but I'm too lazy to write by hand. I have also seen your translation technique where you translate from the language into your own, from your own back into the language. I also think that's probably a good thing to do. I'm too lazy to do it. So can you talk to me about those two things, which I identified as being Lucchino techniques that I don't use, but which I agree with. If I had the discipline to do those things, I would learn better. It's easier for me just to grab my MP3 player and start listening.
Sure thing. So we're opening a can of worms and we don't have much time, but I'll try to be brief. I think one of the most important things for everyone to learn a language efficiently is to find that gray zone, which is not gray at the end of the day, it's a green zone between efficiency and enjoyment. Something can be efficient and something can be effective, but if it's not something you like, you're not going to do it. And on the other way around, if something is enjoyable, but it doesn't move the needle, so to speak, it's not going to move the needle. I think that the reason why language learning is so fascinating is because there's universal principles, but everyone learns in a different way. So on the one hand, you have learning every day, exposing yourself to the language, etc. So let's say strategy, the Greeks will call it strategy, it's a beautiful word. And then you have tactics. Tactics is what you do every day when you sit down and say, what is it that I actually like learning? So to make a long story short, when I start learning a language, now I don't have it here. I have a lot of language books, but they're in the other room. What I do is I choose a book, Assimil. Assimil is what I start with, but it can be any book that is made of dialogues, real language, and I translate it back and forth, meaning first I translate the dialogue into my own native language by typing in on Google Doc. People might say it's completely useless. You already have the translation, but you will see that the art of translating into your own language makes you notice. That's what counts. You will see that if you translate something, you have to understand it. You can't translate something into your own native language if you don't understand it. And then a few days later, I translate that back into my target language, and that's testing without stress. So you test yourself for the sake of using something that is, okay, this is the solution, and I'm trying to solve a problem. I really like Stephen Krashen finished one of his books about language learning as solving problems, learning to solve a linguistic problem. So it's a way of putting the puzzle together, not just try to remember words, but try to remember the meaning that these words convey. Now, is this efficient? It is. Now I've explained just the basic step, but it's much more complex than that. It's made of multiple parts that, every day you do something different on a different unit. The question is, and I always say it, do you want to do this? If you like doing that, then great. You like translating, etc. If you don't like sitting and translating, and you just can read, listen multiple times, do it in a different way. But the concept of reading and listening is always there. So just to make a long story short, the principle is listening, reading, and understanding. You can't acquire language if you don't understand a message. That's why translation is making sure that you understand it and you absorb it. But again, you have to like it. So I always say, try this. Do you like it? Great. If you don't like it, you can test something else or extract the principles. In my courses at the Academy, we have principles first. Learn these because this is what really guides you, moves the needle. Once you understand the principles, then you can mold and twist and tweak the principles so that you can create what works for you, because language learning is something unique to you. I remember back in the day before the internet era, I thought, oh, this is the best method of the world. No, it's not. It's just one method that I came up with that works really well with me, and it has been working very well for those took the bidirectional translation course at my academy. But some people might say, I don't like this method. I want to try something else, and that's perfectly fine. This is the way for me to acquire, let's say, a foundation in the language. For 3 months, I do this back and forth thing. Then I hate it. Then I can't stand it, because language learning is something that moves all the time, like transforms itself. Your skills change with time. So something you liked doing at the beginning, maybe you don't like doing them the same way later. So for 3 months, I just spent these 3 months, just imagine climbing this mountain, sweating, spending 1 hour, 15 minutes learning the language the hard way, sitting down and trying to understand every nook and cranny of the language. I did this in January, 1st of January till the 31st of March, 2024 with Turkish. But then I just couldn't even look at Asimil anymore. And I told myself, okay, why did I do this? It's because this facilitates the acquisition of language. Now that I have a good grasp of how the language sounds, I went to Link, I went to YouTube, I downloaded podcasts, and I could listen and read without even grammar explanations because I understood the basics, so to speak. So for me, this learning, hard learning, like deliberate learning, is only conducive to acquisition. I can't wait to learn by acquiring the language, not learning it. But this 3-month thing is for me necessary just to not speed up things because I'm not in a hurry, but to understand things because, as you know, sometimes something that is really hard to do, it takes concentration, attention. Then it's easier. I can relax. I can just, listening to something and understand it. So it's a mix of deliberate and acquiring depending on where I am. But again, everybody is different. I use this technique, bidirectional translation. Then I moved on to basically just listening and reading while listening, or reading while reading subtitles while watching videos for the intermediate stage. Massively, a huge amount of podcasts and videos using Link, using many resources, 3 or 4 normally. And then I just, once I become a language user, I start reading and watching movies, etc.
Now, that leads me to then the second part of my question, which was the handwriting. So when you do your translation, is that handwriting? And what do you think is the importance or the benefit? What are the benefits of writing by hand versus writing on the computer, or even not writing at all?
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
So for me, the first 3 months, I'm just writing Google Doc because for me, it's faster to type. But I don't have it now, but I don't know where it is. But I also write a little bit, but it's in the second part after 3 months when I start listening to podcasts and watching videos that I rely on writing. So what I do is normally I write on a loose piece of paper, and then on Saturdays and Sundays, I transfer all these words into these notebooks here. Now, I don't do it for a long period of time. I do it maybe for 6 months, 7 months, depending on things, and I try to make it as fun as possible. What is it that I do? I'm just going to give you an example. So whether it's YouTube videos, it's podcasts, or, and in particular, conversations with a tutor, I'm sorry, my handwriting is terrible, but I'm just going to give you an idea. I write just when I re-listen to the conversation, but this goes for podcasts as well. I first write something that is called episodic memory framework. This is basically a fancy word to say that all these pieces of information are related.
What language are we looking at there? It's hard for me to make out.
It's because of my handwriting. So on the one hand, it's Greek here. This is Greek.
Oh, yes, I can see it.
Because
Yeah.
I think it's mirrored. So this is Greek and the
Yeah.
other one is English because it's a corresponding sentence.
Right.
And these sentences are just, or chunks, I call them chunks, are just related to that one conversation. So this is like lesson 5. This is like conversations with Daria number 10. This is the 10th notebook. Let me show you here. I give it a label.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I just write, for example, let me see here. We are all together. A lot of interesting things can happen. I don't know if you know, to tell you the truth, all these chunks. And then the amazing thing is that I remember this conversation because of this episodic memory framework. And I can reenact the conversation. Just on Saturday, for example, I take this, I stand up and I talk. And what I do is that I rehearse words. I don't like rehearsing words for the sake of rehearsing words. I always like using words within a specific context. And the thing is that people tend to think, for example, oh, use mind maps, or you can maybe talk about all the animals like giraffe. I don't know, you learn all these words. I don't think that's very efficient. I think it's much more efficient to group these words into situations. For example, you can do this on Link, you learn those words and those expressions related to that one podcast that I learned that one day. So basically, what I do is I tend to learn in spurts and with podcasts and videos, etc. And all these words, I just write. I like writing things down. I move things from one place to the other. So when I learn from a podcast, I write it on a loose piece of paper. Then on Saturday and Sunday, when I have a little bit more time and energy, I pour them all into one space. And you can say, well, why don't you put it in a spreadsheet? Why don't you put it in a Google Doc? It doesn't work for me. When I handwrite, handwriting is an act of creation. When you create you craft your own word, it takes those 2-3 seconds that allow the brain to internalize the words themselves. And I thought, I'm always wondered, why does this work so well? Why do I remember things much better when I handwrite them? I write them in chunks and I put them within, a specific topic. And then I looked up all these scientific articles and they all point to one direction, that handwriting beats digital typing tenfold or 10 times. But I think we need both. The internet gives us, it makes everything available, gives us speed, but the handwriting gives us depth, so to speak. And so why not use both?
I think there's some evidence, too, that the actual physical activity of writing by hand connects to your brain in such a way that helps with learning. So,
it does.
Again, you asked me in the earlier discussion, if I had 60 days to learn a language, what would I do? Writing by hand would be a big part of it. Maybe even your translation technique. I'm a dilettante right now, so I do whatever's easiest for me, which is just listening. However, if a person is determined to improve in the language, whether they have a test or whatever, or they have set themselves specific goals, I'm quite sure those techniques are very effective. Which brings me to my next question. You mentioned that your techniques evolve depending on your stage in the language, or maybe what you like to do evolves depending on your stage in the language. But over the years, since say you were 10 years old, to what extent have your techniques, given all of the technological change that has taken place, to what extent have your techniques, the things that you like to do or the things that you consider effective, to what extent have they changed over the last, I'm guessing, 20 some odd years?
It's an excellent question, and my answer is not much, meaning that the core of what I do hasn't changed at all. Listening, reading, etc. It's how I do it that changes, in the sense that now we have these amazing tools that allow us, for example, to understand anything that we didn't have before. To give you an example, if I had learned Chinese, I don't know, say 30 years ago, it would have been at a loss. Imagine in front of a Chinese text with just these characters. And I use Link, which allowed me to, just download the thing, and you could download the whole transcript. I could use, for example, Google Translate, or I could click on each word and it gave me directly the meaning. I could see the sentences. That was a game changer. But fundamentally, it facilitated what I've already been doing. Human beings have been learning languages since the dawn of time, as they say. 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, by speaking. But now we have the technology to make it, to make it easier, I would say. So fundamentally, not much until 2022, when ChatGPT happened, and then you have all these AI tools that allow you, for example, one thing I'm testing and I really like it is I'm talking to a machine. 30 years ago, they would have told me that I would have spent like 30 minutes, 60 minutes talking to a machine in Greek. I would have been strange, but that is also making a difference for my Greek because I'm speaking with no stress. Even an experienced person, like I consider myself an experienced person when an expert when it comes to language learning, second language acquisition, I have a certain degree of stress because I'm a human being. If I speak a language I don't speak well, there's always a certain degree of stress or anxiety. I don't have that with speaking with AI. And also ChatGPT, the one thing that I've been using it a lot is you can write and you can get immediate corrections. It can tell you also how to improve, what to say instead of, you can say this and you can say that. So I think AI will not change fundamentally, it will not change the way we acquire language, but it will facilitate the process of learning languages. The one trap that we should not fall into is to think, oh, I'm just going to spend all of my time speaking with AI or just spending too much time in the digital world. I think the language learning can also, again, here with notebooks, writing, handwriting, talking to people, it doesn't have to replace all those activities we've been doing. So to answer your question, I haven't changed my way of learning over the last 20 years, but it has slightly improved, and it was facilitated by all this revolution of AI in terms of getting feedback, especially getting feedback without any tutor. I can do it anytime. Wake up at 5, talk to the machine, collect feedback, which I've been doing. Some of these notebooks are AI conversations, and my Greek is exploding in like 2 weeks. I'm getting so much better because it corrects me you can say this in a different way. It gives me suggestions, not only the mistakes, but also different ways of stringing sentences together. So
how,
it's better.
again, I'm not that familiar with it. I know that we have a link. We're looking to introduce AI. We want to make sure we do it right in a way that is, as you say, not a distraction, but actually a net benefit. I have used AI in a variety of ways. AI can write a story for me. AI can give me 10 examples of a particular grammar pattern in any language, and it comes up right away. It tends to give me the English translation, which I don't want because I want to import it into LingQ. So then I go back and say, please give me the 10 sentences without any English translation. Then I get them. I import it into LingQ. You can have a written conversation. I haven't yet spoken to ChatGPT. How do you do that?
So I spoke with ChatGPT a little bit. You can install the new voice. It's I think it's available in Canada. It's also in Europe. But I've been using another website which is called Langua. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No.
And it's not that I was skeptical, but apart from LingQ, I don't think I've ever used any other app for language learning. And I said, let me think about that. So I started using this LanguaTalk, and LanguaTalk is called this way. And I was surprised because I could actually speak with the machine, and the machine replied practically in real time. It gave me all the corrections. It gave me, you can click, it gives me also the different way of saying the same thing. And it replies with questions that elicit a conversation, interesting conversation. So I said, okay, well, and then gives me a feedback with PDF, etc. This, you can build it probably with LingQ as well, because it's based upon, another website that offers this service, and it's a game changer. This is the next thing for people who want to improve their speaking, because I was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this, and it's really efficient, and all the students at my school are taking this, and it's surprising. It's good.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to look into that.
You should try.
Definitely.
Yes,
Langua, Langu.
Langua or LanguaTalk. Yes, if you write Langua or LanguaTalk, you will find it, and it's really good.
I will have a look. One more thing. You talked a lot in your book about mindset. Oh, initially you had a mindset that you couldn't learn languages. Now you have a mindset that you can learn languages. And of course, with every language that you learn, you're confirming your confidence that you can do so. I would imagine, therefore, that there's only been 2 changes in your mindset. A, the mindset that says you can't learn, and then acquiring this mindset that you can learn, and that's not permanently your mindset. Or has your mindset changed or evolved over time? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, what can you tell people who, beyond telling people you can do it, the person whose mindset is basically, I'm never going to become fluent. Like, what can you say to that person to convince them? Or is there anything that can be said?
So the answer to the first question, I would say my mindset has changed in the sense that when I was 13 or 12, actually, to be more precise, was 1993. When I started working with Susan, I thought I would never learn a foreign language. Now that I speak a few, I know for a fact that this is possible. Now, the interesting thing is that a lot of people tend to answer with, oh, you must be a genius, you must be talented. And there's a big danger to that statement, because if you say that someone is, or you think for that matter, that someone is talented, then you put yourself automatically into the category of the non-talented. The one thing I've discovered, I think it's a universal truth, is that if you speak your own native language well, that's not guaranteed because you might have some sort of impairment. But if you speak your own native language well, you can learn and acquire any other language because the human brain is equipped to deal with and learn as many languages as possible. As many languages you can get. The limits are time and space, obviously, because we're mortals and we sooner or later we have to leave this planet, but you can learn as many languages as possible. Now, for those who come to me and say, these are just words you've learned because you're talented, I would say that it's important to trust the process and to be flexible and to try. I still remember this when I was so desperate that this is a memory that got, even now, 30 years, this happened 30 years ago. I tried to ride a bike for the first time. I couldn't. My father said, patience, my boy, you're going to get there. And I tried and I tried and I tried and I stumbled and I fell, etc. After 2 or 3 days of hell, I just realized magic was still remember the day. Oh, I can actually ride a bike. And I think with language learning is nowadays we have a lot of knowledge. I think that trusting the process means to listen to people. Sure, Steve, Luca, and everybody else, get what works for you, try things out, and continue trying to learn. And most of all, as we always say, learn, listen, and read. Read and listen. Combine these two. Watch stuff that you're interested in. I always say the fundamental rule, if you want to see results, is first, trust the process. And second, read or listen, and watch stuff that is understandable, interesting, and slightly higher than your level so that it's not discouraging. If you do that, sooner or later, the magic will happen, meaning that you will get the language in you and then you will start speaking. Yes, it won't be easy. It won't be magic that all of a sudden you start speaking fluently. You will struggle at first, but then you will get there. And it's one last thing I wanted to say. It's like climbing a mountain. Instead of thinking constantly about the peak of the mountain, you see the snow, it's beautiful, Everest, you're going to get there. Focus on, turn around to look at the landscape. Focus on the stretch you've covered so far. Most people focus on what is ahead instead of thinking what they've covered.
I mean, that's also something that you say in your book, and which made me think of the book Atomic Habits, and that is that you have to focus on your daily activities rather than focusing on sort of long-term goals. I mean, the long-term goals are nice to have, but you have to set yourself some short-term goals in terms of the amount of time you're going to spend on different activities. Part of doing that is, as you say, believing in the process, enjoying the process. You have to have that feeling, I want to be doing what I'm doing now. I am glad, even though it's not evident that I'm getting anywhere, but I enjoy doing what I'm doing. So I think that's also part of that mindset, believing in yourself, but also believing that you're doing something worthwhile. You're doing something that you value. You're doing something that you enjoy. All of those things, I guess to some extent, you either have that attitude or you don't. I'm not sure how you can convince someone that doesn't enjoy language learning, that doesn't think they're going to get anywhere. But once they overcome that obstacle and they convince themselves that they can learn, that they enjoy the learning process, that they found a process that they enjoy, then after that, there's no looking back.
I agree. That's the reason why I say the flexibility, open-mindedness is really important, because if you're open-minded, you're, okay, I don't have this mindset, but I might get it. I don't know if you ever heard of Carol Dweck. She talks about mindset. Her book is about mindset, and you can apply to anything in life. And mindset about also, creating goals. That's the same thing. I talk about this in the book. People tend to think that goals are, hey, I want to be fluent in 3 weeks, but this doesn't really move the needle. Instead, if you think, what is it that I have to do every day to get there?
Right.
Well, think about, hey, I want to improve my listening comprehension. You don't have control over goals, but you do have control over what you do every day, over the process.
Exactly.
So 15 minutes a day, okay, I can listen to stuff, and then eventually I will get there. And people, I believe that this has been my experience as a teacher, as a coach, that once you shift, you have this mind shift, you experience this mind shift between, okay, I'm not going to focus on goals and performance and results anymore. I'm going to focus on what I can do in the here and now every single day. That changes everything. And that is part of your mindset.
Absolutely. Agree. Last question, because you mentioned AI. So people often now come to me and say, well, Steve, nobody's going to have to learn languages in the future because you can go to Vietnam and talk to your computer, and AI is going to make it unnecessary to learn languages. So Luca's view on how technology is going to change language learning, the importance of language learning, or things having to do with how people learn languages and their motivation to learn languages.
That's a philosophical question. So on the one hand, as I said before, I think it's going to facilitate language learning if we know how to learn, because there's still a lot of people who don't know. But if you know how to learn and you use the tools that we have, then I think AI, and we've been talking about AI and ChatGPT 2022, but the reality is we've been working with AI over the last 10 years, what we can do with translators, DeepL, Google Translate, Link, everything, AI is embedded in that. So on the one hand, I think if you know how to use it and you don't get sucked in the rabbit hole of technology is great, I'm going to use just technology and going to get lost in that dungeon, then it's a great weapon, if you want to call it weapon, in your arsenal, in your learning arsenal. On the other hand, though, I think it's up to us to decide what to do with it. Again, it comes down to your mindset. So a person can say, I don't need to learn English because I can have a translator. I can use a phone and I can talk to a Vietnamese by means of translation and whatever. Another person would say, well, I want to learn this language because it's not just about the words and the grammar. I think that every language you learn, it changes you in a fundamental way that you don't know. You realize it later. Oh, this language has changed me. So I think it's very valuable for a lot of reasons. For obvious reasons, such as you can find travel all around the world, you can talk to people, it's easier to communicate, but it changes you. It makes you understand, and this might sound trivial, but it's not at all. It makes you understand we're all very similar, human beings very similar. We tend to look at differences. Oh, that guy is black, white, thinks in a different way, eats different stuff. Fundamentally, you want the same things, and you understand it through language. So language changes you as a person, makes you richer, and it's always, always worth learning. And no matter how many translators we have, no matter how many machines can speak in our stead. This has been my experience. I can tell you that after learning 15 languages, you'll learn even more. You are a richer person. You are more open to the world. You understand it from other perspectives, something that a monolingual will never be able to do. And I don't remember who said that, some wise man from the past, If you know another language, it helps you understand your own language. It gives you a different perspective of the world. So it's always, I think it will depend on the single individual. And they want to learn language. They have a certain mindset, want to learn a language to improve themselves for self-growth. Great. They want to use all the AI tools that we have now. They can also do that. But I don't see language learning dying.
No, I agree with you. And I think that's a good note to end on. And I mean, the reality is, like, communicating doesn't just mean asking for directions to the bathroom.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's not just like, beers, please. I mean, communicating is, if you sit down at a table, if we're talking Vietnamese, okay, sitting on these little low-slung chairs on the sidewalk, eating your pho. And if you're with Vietnamese people, you want to be talking, communicating, connecting. Maybe you're sitting beside this nice-looking girl at the bar. You don't want to be talking into your phone. You want to talk to her, So, yeah, I think I agree with you. Language learning will only be facilitated by technology, AI. It's not going to be replaced by those things, although those people have a very sort of instrumental attitude towards language communication, like show me the way to the bathroom. They will undoubtedly rely on their telephone. But people who genuinely want to communicate and understand, people of a different culture, AI is only going to facilitate that. Luca, can you please tell my listeners where they can find you?
So it's
all the different possible. Yes.
It's very easy. You just type on Google Luca Lampariello. You will find my website, which is lucalamparello.com. Or you can write Luca Lampariello, Lucalamparello. It's easy though. Lampariello. You say it as you write it. And they will also find my YouTube channel. lucalamparello.com is the website where I also have my academy, the courses, the blog, and the book. And they can also find the book that you read.
And this is not a website for learning Italian specifically. It's a website for learning how to learn languages.
Yes, it's called Smart Language Learning Academy because it's an academy where we have online courses to train people to use their brain to learn languages more effectively. We talked about a few things here, but we go much more in depth about techniques, strategies, and of course, principles.
Okay, thank you, Luca. I recommend that people go there and get to know more about your methods. And it's been a great discussion, and I look forward to the next time we meet in person.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Steve. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.